You ever wonder how scientists can actually study our emotions? I mean, feelings are so personal, so messy, right? Well, today, we're diving into exactly that, the incredible science of how researchers take something as abstract as a feeling and turn it into something they can actually measure. It's pretty fascinating.
So, let's try a quick thought experiment. You just absolutely crushed a huge presentation at work. Or maybe you just got some amazing news. What's the very first thing you do? I bet for a lot of you, it's grabbing your phone to call someone, a friend, your partner, your mom, just someone to share that incredible feeling with.
You know that impulse to connect with someone, whether you're celebrating or you're feeling down, isn't just some random personality quirk. It's a fundamental part of being human. And of course, scientists have a name for it: interpersonal emotion regulation. Sounds super technical, I know, but all it really means is that we use each other to help handle our emotional lives.
But this brings up a huge challenge for science. See, it's one thing to know that we do this. It's another thing entirely to study it. To really get what's going on, researchers have to figure out a way to measure it. And that's where it gets really interesting.
So how in the world do you do that? How do you take a feeling, something that's completely inside your own head, totally subjective, and turn it into actual data? You know, numbers on a spreadsheet that you can analyze. It seems kind of impossible, doesn't it? But it turns out psychologists have gotten pretty darn clever about it.
To crack this problem, researchers basically follow two main paths. Each one gives them a totally different but equally important view into our emotional world. They look at what we say we do, and then they look at what we actually do.
So on one hand, you've got self-report questionnaires. These are basically surveys that ask you about your own habits and beliefs about your emotions. And on the other hand, you have observational coding. This is where trained experts watch and analyze how we behave in real time. It's our own story versus what an outsider sees, and you really need both to get anywhere close to the full picture.
All right, so let's pop open this toolbox and take a look at the actual instruments psychologists use to measure all these emotional strategies we've been talking about.
First up is a big one. It's called the Interpersonal Emotion Regulation Questionnaire, or IERQ for short. The best way to think about this is as a detailed survey designed to figure out how exactly you lean on other people for emotional support.
So the IERQ digs into 4 key strategies. Are you just looking for comfort, like a hug? They call that soothing. Or are you watching how someone else handles a situation to figure out how you should feel? That's social modeling. Maybe you're asking a friend to give you a fresh take on a problem. That's perspective taking. Or, my favorite, are you trying to share good news to make that happy feeling even bigger? That's enhancing positive affect. And what's cool is that research using this tool has found that stuff like perspective taking is a really strong predictor of how happy people are in their relationships.
But let's be real, reaching out to people doesn't always help. Sometimes our attempts to connect can backfire or even make things worse. And that's exactly what the next tool, the DIRE scale, is designed to look at.
The DIRE scales zeroes in on what researchers call maladaptive patterns. It's a fancy way of saying the unhelpful habits we fall into. You know what I'm talking about? When you keep asking a friend for reassurance, but you never actually believe them, or when you just vent and vent about a problem but never actually try to solve it. This scale helps flag when our social strategies are actually causing more problems, and these patterns often show up in people struggling with things like anxiety.
Okay, our next tool, EROS, adds another really important layer. It's not just about what strategy you use, but how often you use it, and it asks a critical question. Are you trying to manage your own feelings, or are you trying to manage someone else's?
So, with EROS, the key ideas are frequency and direction. It measures whether you're trying to upregulate a feeling, that is, make a positive emotion stronger, or downregulate it, trying to make a negative emotion weaker. And it looks at whether you're doing this for yourself or for other people. A perfect example is trying to tell a joke to cheer up a coworker. That's a classic case of upregulating their positive emotions.
So our last questionnaire is the IRQ, and this one tries to bring everything together. It's sort of the all-in-one tool that aims to give the most complete picture.
Now, what I think is so smart about the IRQ is that it doesn't just ask what you do, it also asks about your motivation, like why are you reaching out in the first place? And, this is crucial, it asks about the effectiveness. In other words, when you do this, does it actually work? Does it make you feel better? Getting all that information together gives researchers a way deeper understanding of what's going on.
Okay, so questionnaires are obviously super useful for getting inside people's heads. But what about what happens in the real world, in the heat of the moment, when we're not thinking about filling out a survey? For that, you need a completely different method.
And this is where we get to behavioral coding, which is just incredible. So picture this. Researchers bring people into a lab and record them having a conversation. Maybe it's a couple talking about a disagreement. Then a team of highly trained coders sits down and analyzes that video, often frame by frame. They're not just watching the conversation, they're scoring dozens of tiny, specific cues. A facial expression that lasts less than a second, a slight change in the tone of voice, a supportive pat on the arm. Every single detail gets logged. It is meticulous, painstaking work. But it's how they turn a living, breathing human interaction into objective data.
So, we've got all these really clever tools, right? But that leaves us with a giant question. How do we know they actually work? How do we trust the results? Well, in science, any measurement worth its salt has to pass two very important tests.
The first one is called reliability, and all that means is the tool consistent? If you use it over and over again in the same situation, are you going to get the same result every time?
The best analogy for this is a simple bathroom scale, right? If you step on it, step off, and step on again, and it gives you the exact same weight all 3 times, you'd say that scale is reliable. It's consistent.
But being consistent isn't enough. That brings us to the second, and you could argue more important, test, validity. And this asks a much deeper question. Is your tool actually measuring what you think it's measuring?
Let's go back to our scale. It could be perfectly reliable, giving you the same number every time, but what if that number is totally wrong? What if it's 5 pounds off? Or even crazier, what if your scale is somehow measuring the temperature in the room instead of your weight? A valid scale is one that is both consistent and accurate. So for these emotion tools, validity makes sure they're actually measuring emotion regulation and not just say how outgoing someone is.
Okay, so we've looked at the tools. We know they have to be reliable and valid. But so what? Why go through all this trouble to turn our feelings into facts? Why does this actually matter in our day-to-day lives?
Well, it matters a whole lot, because this is how we stop just guessing about our emotional lives and start gathering actual evidence. This kind of research is what helps us figure out what actually makes a relationship healthy and strong. It shows us what effective teamwork and leadership really look like on an emotional level. And maybe most importantly, it forges that scientific link between these social skills and our own personal happiness and well-being.
So the next time you find yourself reaching out to a friend or offering a kind word to someone who's struggling, you can see it for what it truly is. Not just a simple little act, but a complex, measurable, and absolutely vital part of what makes us human. So the question I want to leave you with is, knowing all of this, does it change how you think about your own conversations and relationships?